I mean, this week, for example, it's been International Women's Day, and there have been a couple of instances, I think you tweeted about one, where basically biological men have been given all sorts of kind of award, an award, International Woman of Courage, and it's biological man. But the elite women around them seem to have no problem with that.
Yep. Well,
this is one of the things,
yes.
actually, Mo, sorry. You know, I've had arguments with female friends of mine. Why is it that so many women, you know, whether they are, you know, political figures in America or wherever, seem to be, you know, helping this along?
And consistently, the group who is most supportive of abolishing biological sex in law is educated middle-class women, middle and upper-class women. And a number of people have asked me this question. So my theory on this is really that it remains, if you're a knowledge class woman, which is to say your work happens at a laptop, it's broadly in your interests for there to be no legal recognition that sex is a thing. Now, I mean, I was very politely taken to task in my Twitter messages the other day by a barrister who said, "Now, excuse me, not all barristers think the same about this." But I took as one example of a knowledge class profession, barrister. I mean, you could take journalist as well, what I do for a living. There's no reason on earth why I should be any more or less competent as a journalist by virtue of my sex, because at the end of the day, the work involves thinking and reading and typing. And there's no physical component to that, really. It's all cognitive, almost all cognitive. Some people who don't like journalists might take issue with cognitive, but we'll leave that for now. But you understand the point. You understand what I'm saying. You know, there are lots of jobs like that where it really doesn't make very much difference at all what sex you are. And for women in those jobs, it's not comfortable at all for anybody to suggest that there might be situations where sex does matter. You know, say for example there are different workplace regulations for men and for women. Now I can see, you know, were I a barrister or an accountant or, you know, any one of these other professions, I might see that as a threat because it entrenches in law and policy this idea that I should be treated differently because of my sex, when obviously, depending, you know, my professional performance is in no way affected by my sex. And so from that point of view, and in terms of my class interests, which I'm very happy to universalize as everybody's interests, it clearly seems as though women's interests are best served by obliterating sex altogether. And it's a logical continuation of that if we're not going to discriminate against people on the basis of their sex, we shouldn't discriminate against women who aren't in fact female. Because, you know, because sex, we should act in all instances as though sex doesn't in fact matter. Yeah. So I can see how the logical endpoint of a completely sex agnostic understanding of what constitutes women's interests, as in abolishing sex altogether, is the way forward for feminism and for progress. Then you find yourself in a position where you can't really argue, you can't really exclude women who are not in fact female.
Right.
Because that's just sex discrimination, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, you know, and that condenses down to the mantra you see quite a lot on Twitter and places like that says my feminism will include trans women or it isn't feminism. And that's the thought terminating cliche for liberal feminism now. And from that and it encapsulates that basic set of class and economic interests.